Call to order regular meeting of the Board of Education, December 19th, 2019 at 7 o'clock p.m. If you could do please call the roll.
Blakely. Here. Drummel.
Here.
Gaspar.
Here.
Locke.
Here.
Lowe.
Present.
Meadows.
Here.
Meister.
Here. Jack Gasper, you leading us?
Okay.
Thanks to Tina.
I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good job. Dr. Hitchens, were there any items we removed from or added to the agenda tonight?
There might be one on the consent agenda, personnel report.
So you made a change, right?
I did make a change today, yeah. We had an addition to a hiring. You'll note it on there. It's Gordon Sindelar. He was hired as a level 1 tech and will be starting January 6th, but it's in there.
All right, so that was changed since we first posted it, but the rest of the
But it's in the
agenda
board
is
book now.
all good.
All right, then the first item is our public hearing on the calendar configuration modification, and I understand Dr. Newkirk, are you doing that?
Sure. The process of, we don't do this very often in Batavia, but the process for requesting a waiver or a modification of school code is a rather lengthy process, and it requires us to gather public feedback about that proposed change. So we've gone through the process of identifying what part of the school code, which is kind of really hampering us, and this has to do with our school calendar. So in the past, we've had half-day SIP days, school improvement days. There's a particular configuration that you have to use in order to bank time to use those days, but we find them valuable for staff development. However, half-days are problematic for our parents and our parent community, so we're looking to waive the requirement for the half-day school improvement day and instead do a full day. So in our current calendar, we have 3 school improvement days, half-days. We would convert that to 1 full day, and that would allow us to do better professional development for our staff because it's in a full day format. Because in our current configuration, we have 3 hours of school, so we're not all together at any one time because of our start times. And we would benefit from having that full day where we could really do that work of digging in deep to learning. So that's what we're asking for public feedback about.
All right, we would like to open for public comment, if anyone had comments on the calendar modification. All right, then we will close the hearing on the calendar modification question. Next item on our agenda is public comments. I understand that no one has pink sheets, no one wanted to make comments tonight. Then we'll jump right into our BPS partners. We'll start with Todd Swanson tonight. I like to mix it up, keep it No, it's just a phone call.
Hi, everyone.
Hi,
Happy last meeting of 2019. For my report tonight, I sort of wrote a poem. So if you'll indulge me for a little bit of Christmas poetry here.
Elementary teacher.
'Twas the week before break, and all through the halls, the cheer of finals are done echoed off the high school walls. The data was hung on charts at Rotolo to share that a new change in leadership has been a breath of fresh air. And in our elementary buildings of 6, the children behave perfectly and none are up to tricks. The teachers and staff can see the end well in sight. When a moment of panic hits, if Power School had been updated all right. But when the Friday bell rings, you'll see such a sight as our staff sends their kids home for some family delight. And we hear the staff cheer as they drive out of sight. Merry Christmas to all, and to all a good night. That's the report for this one. Thanks, everyone. Have a good holiday.
Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah.
Do you guys have a stronger band?
I did not realize what I was setting you up for.
Who else has a poem? Who else has a poem? Come on.
Yeah. I'm also a student master's too.
Whole thing and I am big.
Just have a couple.
I brought my tap shoes for a reason.
There you go. Don't like tease us and then not deliver.
Okay, so for this meeting, 4 of the graphics students, well, first of all, the graphics program at the high school, they have some phenomenally talented students. And 4 of them, Daniela Kerr, Morgan Garrison, Rebecca Marston, and Sarah Anderson, all won banners for downtown. So they're each assigned to a different season. So I think Daniela is fall, spring, fall, winter, spring, summer, in that order. So they'll be designing the banners for downtown for next year. And then also Batavia, the senior class had 83 Illinois State Scholars, and State Scholars, that's awarded on the top 10% for your ACT or SAT and then your GPA. So the high school graduating class of 500 had 83, so that's a pretty good number. And then also Link Crew is having, or they had their Cocoa and Cram last week with like the freshmen to like help them get in the swing of things. And then also there was a math competition last weekend, and not only did the kids on that team win several ribbons in several different places, but there were also some perfect score medalists, which is pretty good if you consider that the math they're doing is like advanced algebra, calculus, pre-calc, trig, all that fun stuff. So
Then, next slide. Sorry. On the 19th, the first ever girls wrestling match under the spotlights occurred, and we're on the front end of really embracing girls wrestling. So that's a pretty big event for Batavia and the girls wrestling world as a whole. On the 9th, we'll have incoming freshman night, so that's like a basic orientation, activities fair, so they can get introduced to all the activities that they might want to be doing that next year, and then we can move it.
And then this year we're also going to be doing a Winterfest, and it's the first time that Batavia's done Winterfest, and it's through a company called My Boom Tour. And so they do actually go on tour to schools around the area. So they do it at like Glenbard North. I know they do it at Caneland. I think one of the St. Charles schools does it as well. And it's the first time because we've been pardon? East?
But it's not at East.
Okay, then probably North. Because we've been talking about having a winter dance for a really long time, but the thought of Sadie's always gets shot down. And then like a barn dance. Basically, there's never anything that happens from a winter dance. So now it's through My Boom Tour, and it's on the 7th of March. And not only is student council like participating in this, they're getting people from all clubs, all different activities and grade levels and involvement in the school. They're trying to get everyone to come and make this a really unified like school dance. So.
And
Okay, so Winterfest is gonna have like 3 different stages, and it's gonna take place in the field house, in the main gym, and in the middle gym, I think. And then they're also going to have A101, which is like the windmill room, I don't know, whatever you wanna call it. They're gonna have a silent disco or a silent DJ in there. I don't know if you know what that is. Yeah, it's like you have the headphones, and then you can like press one of 3 colors, but they're just like stations that you can tune into. And so the DJ has like 3 different like concerts almost in the same room. And in theory, it's supposed to be like you're dancing to like your station, and it's supposed to look really cool. I've never been to one. He showed us videos. By he, I'm talking to DJ AJ. This is the guy that comes to the high school. I'm being serious. That's his name. This is the guy that comes to the high school and like helps us with it. He actually came last Wednesday, and like he's been meeting with us for almost a year now. And so there's that. Then there's also going to be art displays with the students from National Art Honors Society. So his idea was, and I'm going into a lot of detail now, but his idea was like in the cafeteria they would have like a big poster, and then on the first day like the whole student body is supposed to be really confused as to like what this poster is. And then that Monday night like National Art Honors Society would come and like paint a little bit of it. And then throughout the week they would like keep working on it until it's completely like done. And then they would display the art at the Winterfest, which would be on a Saturday. So they'd have that, and then other like art exhibits, and they'd have music, and it's just gonna be a really big thing. And there's gonna be games and arcades and shirts and the whole ordeal, yeah.
That sounds very exciting. Sorry, Joe.
And slightly less extravagant, but still very important. The dance team took 2nd and 3rd place at their most recent competition. So, yeah.
All right, thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Have a good break.
Thank you.
Yes.
Olympic finals.
Thank you. Happy holidays.
Oh, I didn't think the kids started till tomorrow. Yeah, I guess it doesn't really matter. John Gaspar, you want to start with committee updates?
just get your Hall of Honor nominations in before February 1st. That's all I have.
We're giving them a break. Erin, I'm sorry, go ahead.
That's okay. LAC is on break for December.
RAC had a very well-attended meeting. It was a good meeting. We made a recommendation for the 5-year forecast, which is being presented. Council also reviewed analysis of school start times. That's specifically in relationship to busing and routing and trying to determine methodologies of making that more efficient and cost-effective. Ultimately, we as a group, it was decided that kind of the approximate savings wasn't enough to kind of disrupt things as of yet, but if it got to the point where we were looking at school schedules anyway, it's something to keep in mind. And then other than that, it was a good meeting and I really enjoyed it. So thank you for keeping it going and hosting it.
That's good. Helping us out. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Greg. I was the board representative at our Building Our Future Together meeting this month. And I know we have an update on the agenda for later, so I won't go into it, but it was an awesome meeting. I was actually very interested in what they were talking about and the things that we got to see. And then Insurance Committee meets Thursday.
I have nothing for stipend committee.
We did have a CAC meeting right after our last meeting. Unfortunately, I missed it, so I will defer to Brad if he wants to give us an update.
Sure, we heard from our social studies leadership team who's working on K-12 curriculum and social studies. We talked about some capacity issues with a lot of different needs based on state mandates, including looking at science, health, our CTE programming, and electives due to changes to Perkins 5 funding. So we talked about how to balance all of those needs. We approved a trial of some first grade reading curricular materials for a pilot. And then we talked about some training for our teachers for new 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade social studies materials.
We had our beefy meeting just days after our last meeting, so it seems like a long time ago. But, and Erin, please feel free to chip in at any moment because you're more in charge of this. But we have a scavenger hunt fundraiser on February 29th. It's going to be a busy night in town. But, teams of 4 will compete throughout town for a scavenger hunt. And then afterwards, we will meet at Pal Joey's for dinner and a raffle. So it's $50 per couple? Or per team? Per person. Okay, I'm sorry. Not sure it was clear on the website. But there's raffle prizes and things like that. So also, grants are open for applications, where they're taking applications for grants. It's a little bit different process this year, but you can go on the website, the foundation website. And in the past, I think there's always been this reputation that it's teacher grants, and it's not for teachers only. And I thought it was interesting because I actually went on the website and I read this. They even mentioned students, and I'm sorry the kids left. I kind of wanted to stress this, that anybody can apply. Teachers, PTOs, community organizations, businesses, and students that even mentioned. And I would love to see a group of students apply. So teachers out there, even if, if you've got a group of students that you might want to work with, I think that would be a great idea. And those are due February 7th. But be sure to look on the website and get some information about information. So, scholarships are now being accepted starting January 6th. So if you're a student graduating this year.
February 6th?
What?
Did you say February 6th?
January 6th. I'm sorry, maybe I did. No. January 6th is when the applications open, but I think they'll be on there either tonight or tomorrow that you can start filling them out. But you can turn them in starting January 6th. Deadline is March 6th. Yes, 4 p.m. So start applying. Because I'm sure you have nothing better than everybody to do as a student. So that's about it. BataviaFoundation.org for all your information. So Did you want to add anything about the treasure hunt?
No?
There'll be more information as we get
Yeah.
closer about prizes and raffle items and stuff like that. Should be fun then?
Okay, the next item is our consent agenda, which is our opportunity to approve a number of routine business items that are all outlined in the board book. And Mr. Pierce will take us through that.
Yeah, here we go. 5.1 is the approval of the November 19th, 2019 regular meeting minutes. 5.2 is the personnel report. 5.3 is payroll and bills. 5.4, we have two significant donations. One was from Beefy and Chipin, $8,640 for after-school mentoring. We also have one from Walmart for $1,000 for some SEL book purchases for the HC Storm Library. 5.5 is the copy of the board member expenses from the school board conference. 5.6 is the approval of the calendar for the 2020-21 school year. 5.7 are a couple of curriculum contracts. 5.8 is the acceptance of the CAFR for the 2019 fiscal year. And then lastly, 5.9 is the approval of the consent agenda.
Great, any items on the consent agenda for removal or for clarification? All right, then I would entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
So moved.
Moved by Lowe, second by Blakely, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, consent agenda passes. Next item on our agenda is reports. That's Dr. Hitchens.
Right, we have 6 reports tonight. The first 2 are reports that you see every month, so I would open it up to questions if you had any questions about the FOIA requests or the treasurer's reports for the month. So since there are no questions, I think we could turn it over to Holly, who has been working with some of our community partners and is really excited to share about our boardwalk shops that project throughout the community.
Thank you very much, Lisa. I have been privy to a great conversation between the City of Batavia and Batavia Main Street, where in August they invited us to become partners with them on a project that includes some boardwalk shops that, and I will show you pictures here of what some of the renderings of the project look like. So they approached us and asked us if this would be a good project for the trades classes within the high school, and I immediately asked Brad. We sat down, we chatted about it, and kudos to Brad for going full force into this conversation and really gave us the green light of moving forward with this great project. So he then started the conversation with Bronco Meeks, who is the trades teacher at Batavia High School, and Brian Hamlin has been a huge partner with us on this, and really they're taking it over at this point. But the project is that in January of 2020, we will start with that Trades 2 class with 2 of these buildings. The rest of them will either come throughout other terms, or there will be the plans can be used by volunteer groups to build them as volunteers of Batavia Main Street. So the main partner and managing partner on this project is Batavia Main Street. They are going to be securing all the funding. They have already gotten donations for all of the hardy plank materials for the outside from Heinz Lumber. They've got a company to donate all the roofing materials. There's no cost to the district. This is an educational opportunity for our students. The City of Batavia is donating the location that these will be placed on, and also grant money that they received from a federal grant over 10 years ago that they were parceling off for another project. When this came along, it was for economic development, which this falls under. They will be basically 12 by 12 sheds that people will rent for about, I forget the exact number, but somewhere around $2,500 for the summer to use. A small business would come in and sell their baked goods or their already made craft stuff, whatever they want to sell in a 12 by 12 shed. That is what many are kind of saying is an extension of the farmer's market. So it will be in what is called the Art Stop parking lot, which is directly across the street from Oak and Swine at the corner of 25 and Wilson. And the city sees this as a positive way to draw pedestrian traffic to that side of Wilson. And there was a lot of discussion at City Council about if the businesses would be concerned that it would do two things. One, either draw people from their businesses to these shops so they would lose customers, or if it was going to, they were going to lose all these parking spaces. So a lot of conversation has gone on over the years about downtown parking and the lack of, is this a silly thing to do to build something else on top of some of your these resources that are so finite within our downtown area. And Main Street's been great in surveying the businesses in downtown, and they're all on board with saying that this is a great thing. So right now, like I said, at City Council last night, they approved signing the agreement, our community partnership agreement, that basically says that we will build, they're very modular, so they can be taken into pieces out of the Batavia High School dock area by the trades class where the shop classes happen, and then they'll just be put on a flatbed, and once they go out our doors, they're Main Street's property. So we have no responsibility, no liability, no nothing, but I see this as a huge marketing and just community partnership to say, hey, kids built this, and I think that there will be a lot of pride that will come from the students saying that this is something that I made. Looking back and talking with Bronco, and we've heard from them, it's kind of a little bit defeating when they build these mini houses now and then they take them apart at the end of the semester or trimester. So this is something that they can show with pride. This was my class that built this, and they are movable, so if this spot here were to change in landscape or need to be modified, they could then pull these back onto a flatbed and move them to another place. So we think it's a great partnership within the city, the school district, and Main Street, and I hope that you all feel the same.
Awesome. That's great. And Brad, thank you again. I mean, every time you turn around, you're providing another authentic experience or promoting that for our students. And I know that was a goal of ours, and it makes me really proud every time I see these opportunities. And thanks for bringing that together, Holly.
If there are no other questions, I'll move us on to the next topic that we've all been waiting for. We mentioned last month that we subscribe to a policy update service that helps us to go through our policies and make sure that they align with changing legislation, state statutes, etc. And this last version had 500 pages worth of changes. We, senior management and myself, we did go, there was a webinar that helped package and provide some perspective. We went through all of the policies. We also know that there are administrative procedures and exhibits that go along with these policies. We didn't get there yet. That will come in January. In December, we put together just the policies. We were ready with all the recommendations except for a couple. And what we did was we asked for a board volunteer to read it from the board's perspective and say which ones need a little additional discussion. And so Mr. Meadows here said, I'll do it if nobody else wants to, so we're very appreciative that he read every single, all of the rationale and he pulled out some that he thought that maybe we should engage in a discussion about. However, there really weren't any recommendations for changing to like the concepts because these are all changes and there's been some sweeping legislation in this last year, and now this is our policies becoming aligned with that legislation. A couple of the ones that he pointed out, so the rest of them I think he's saying are self-explanatory as far as the rationale makes sense, the changes make sense when you click into that policy. In Batavia, we have two kinds of policies. We have the ones that we just adopt that we'll take the recommendation from this service, this policy subscription service, after they have a whole panel of attorneys and administrators that review all the legislation and make these recommendations. It's part of IASB. This is one of the services that they offer. And so we feel like they've done a great job, and it's our job in Batavia to usually take their recommendations, but sometimes we do tweak them a little bit. So you'll see some that we don't just accept press because we don't have the current version of press. We do a little homegrown version. But most of these we're just adopting either the exact press or their exact recommendations for changes, but we had to incorporate them into our current policies. The first item that Craig said that we should probably just talk about as a board to make sure people understand the reasons why some of these changes are occurring is that giant section about sexual harassment, and there's been some pretty sweeping legislation that affords more protections and requires more training of employees, including board members. So a lot of those changes require board action. For example, you already have adopted a policy or a resolution that says we have these sexual harassment policies and we're not going to stand for harassment, and here's the way that we're going to protect the people who are making harassment complaints. Here's the process and here's their protections. You have to update that because now it also includes elected officials, because the policy was about staff members, staff that are doing the harassing, but should it ever come to an elected official, that wasn't in our policy or in the law, so they made that change. That changed a whole bunch of those procedures. There's also some expansions as far as people taking, being afforded leaves of absences for some traumatic experiences, and really the procedure or the resolution that you guys update, you already have one, but you have to update it. It really does talk about the procedure that should an allegation come against an elected official, how would we manage that? And who would do the investigating. So that's why we need to make some of these changes regarding harassment. And it touched all of those different policies as far as student policies and, you know, section or chapter 5, which would be our employment policies, etc. Questions about that? All right, another big topic that Mr. Meadows here recommended that we talk about, just because it's important that we get this out for everybody. We all know that we're mandated reporters. When we suspect abuse or neglect of a child, we are mandated to report it. And then there have been changes to a few of the laws regarding reporting, and we needed to update our policies. So one of the changes has to do with training. Right now, there is we have to be trained annually on, I think it was annually. Steve, help me out here.
Yes.
Okay, annually. I was getting that confused with the harassment, also had some changes to the training. Annually, we will be training people on their mandated reporter status. And you have to, when we first hire a person or somebody gets seated at the board, we now have to have that in our hands to prove that you've done the training within 30 days of your employment or being seated at the board. And some of the things that people need to know, we've already worked with we have several building administrators in the audience right now. We've worked with them, and we've done some communicating with our staff about no longer, if a few of us suspect abuse or neglect, and we designate one person to make that report to DCFS, there are requirements now that that person who is designated has to say all of the people that were in the room, and then has to report back to all those people, yes, I did make the report, here's the case number, and they have 48 hours to report back that, yes, I've made the report. Because I think what some of the things you've seen in the news maybe, sometimes what we wouldn't want to happen would be to have people in the room say, you should report it, and then that person didn't realize that they were the ones that were supposed to report it. And everybody in the room has the responsibility to report it. And then they did say, it's okay if one person reports on behalf of, but everybody has to list everybody's name. Because individually, we all have the responsibility to report. So those are some of the changes that regarding the reporting, and there were several policies that had to be adjusted because of those changes. And then the cannabis legislation, we know that recreational cannabis will now be legal in Illinois, so that impacted some of our policies. But in general, I would say, just to keep it simple, our districts, our employees while they're at work, and our students, this is a drug and alcohol and tobacco and e-cigarette free district. All of our buildings, anybody who's visiting our buildings, that expectation hasn't changed. So in that respect, our policies, the wording might be changed now that cannabis is not illegal or won't be illegal, but the concept is the same for us as a district. We're drug-free, alcohol-free, tobacco-free, and that is not changing. Questions about any of the policies? Yeah, thank you.
The hoot.
Was there anything else that you thought we needed to discuss?
No, I mean, all of this was just about bringing some level of awareness to it, specifically, not necessarily for discussion, but
Yeah.
if something piques your interest or to get further into it and just to be aware that there are ramifications associated with this that we'll figure out as we move along, but just some highlights of the ones that are either in the news or people have questions about it. I thought it'd be a good chance for everybody to at least become aware of it. So.
Thank you. Yeah, some great questions. All right, if you do think of something that you think we should highlight or another opportunity to talk about it in January, that's when we will bring all these back for your approval, along with some additions.
I do have one thing that I'd like to add. In regard to any of these policies, I think if there's a significant cost that we're going to incur as a district, it would just be nice to know that, hey, this unfunded mandate that we have to do because, press says that we now have to educate the kids on this, and we are not receiving any money on that, just to make everybody aware, hey, this is another burden that we have, so that people don't think that we are just spending money willy-nilly.
Right.
There are things that keep coming to us that we have no control over that cost us money.
Right.
And I think that people are often unaware of it because they slip through the cracks because it happens during, with the press update that nobody really noticed.
Right, that's a great point. Some of the, all of the changes are coming from a good place, but then sometimes the burden on the district is financial or, human capital.
We have to hire more
Time.
people, we have to train people. It costs us money to send people to training. It costs us money to add to the curriculum.
Or even just to administer the policies.
Right.
So,
administrative.
But yeah, I mean,
there's a
so-
few questions I
administrative
talked with
expense.
Lisa about in regards to who pays for this, who funds this. There's comments in some of them about drug testing or the FAFSA thing about who covers the costs or how much more time is it going to take to do these things, and then some of them were related to consultants or contractors associated with the district, that they will bear the burden of the cost associated with some of these additional testing that needs to occur. So we talked a little bit about that, but I appreciate the comment. So,
Thanks.
All right. If there's nothing else, I'll move on to the next report, which is Building Our Future Together. Kathy did attend that last meeting, and most of that meeting, it was hosted at Grace McWayne School. We did get a tour of that building, and most of that meeting we spent reviewing our debriefing the building tours. We went to some other districts and other locations and got some ideas, and that was how we spent that meeting. We didn't get to finish our guiding principles because we spent so much time on the debrief, and we really enjoyed talking about what piqued our interest and what wasn't for us. Because we didn't finish the guiding principles, that's the last step that we need to do before we enter into phase 3 of Building Our Future Together. We did schedule another meeting for January 13th, and I know we can add that to if we do have a volunteer, somebody who wanted to come and check out what our core team looks like when we're hard at work. That one will be at J.B. Nelson School at 5 o'clock on Monday, January 13th. So if a board member wanted to join us, feel free. All right.
I can do it.
Awesome. And we also have another PTO presentation scheduled at Hooverwood School on that same night at 7 o'clock. So a core team member and myself will go, and just to build awareness about this project. And then we will enter into phase 3 where it gets really exciting and drafting and bringing back concepts. And we will keep you informed along the way.
Would it be acceptable for me to attend the Hooverwood portion of that meeting?
You can attend the whole thing if you want.
Well, I have to check with my schedule if I can.
You mean the PTO part?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I figured that's my school, so
Yeah, that'd be great.
an excellent opportunity to kind of
Great.
check a couple boxes at once.
And Sue did say she can make the 5 o'clock meeting.
I'll be the JV, but not.
So we'll begin at 2.
Yeah, you could both go to both if you wanted to.
I thought
Just nobody else.
you won't be there? Craig, you're not there?
To what? The
You don't have a
JV Nelson
program
member?
Oh, there's no program.
There's no program number.
Right. All right, sounds like a plan. And then our last report of the night, financial forecast.
So financial forecast comes from a recommendation of the Resource Responsibility Advisory Council each year, and we just finished that up last week. And as you can see here, here's a projection of ending fund balances for the current year that we're in, 2020 through 2025. So we call this the 5-year financial projection. We're obligated to look out 5 years for a number of reasons, most important of which are our fiduciary responsibilities to and duties to bondholders. Looking at a surplus revised down from our current budget of about $1 million. So what's likely in store for us, or I can assure you is in store for us at this point, is an amendment to our budget, in large part due to the sign-ups for our new HSA medical plan. So more people signed up for that plan, which requires the board to pay upfront the HSA contributions. And so it's a dramatic shift. And overall, the board will save money in medical insurance, but some of that money has to be upfronted in next month, as a matter of fact. And so that will kind of shift when some of those payments are made between fiscal years. So it will actually drive down our 2020 anticipated fund balance. Similar fund balance for 2021, assuming that we maintain status quo in terms of staffing. We know that enrollment in Batavia has been declining. It's been declining for 7 years now, roughly about 2% a year. And by our calculations, that would mean that we could probably reduce staff something on the order of maybe 9 FTE. Now, that never works that way. The students don't show up in the right places all the time. That would be if all the stars aligned and the students were in the exact right places in the exact right schools at the right time, and it just doesn't work that way. So realistically speaking, we could probably reduce staff by maybe 4, maybe 5 if we were lucky FTE. But that's not likely either because of shifting needs in terms of SEL or social emotional learning and student needs, particularly with regard to special education. This particular year in 2020, we have 11.5 FTE more than we did last year while our enrollment is shrinking. And the vast majority of those additional staff are in the areas of supporting class sizes and special education. So at this point, looking at this forecast, and you can see these numbers to short circuit it, if we maintain status quo, we can maintain positive cash flow fund balances for the foreseeable future if we make some adjustments. But that means that we need to maintain status quo in terms of staffing and not grow at the rate that we've been growing in terms of staffing. Things shift in 2022. As Albert Einstein once said, the most powerful force in the universe is compounding interest, and the cost of salaries and medical insurance, while in check now at less than 5% ideally, will drive us likely to the edge of a balanced budget. I believe that we can make modifications in 2022 and 2023 so that we can be assured that those surpluses do come in, but not necessarily drastic, not as drastic as we've seen in the last couple of years, but we will have a balanced budget. But things start to shift and continue to shift in 2024. And the reason being in 2025 that things look as good as they do is that we've got a couple of things working for us. One is the expiration of the current DEA contract, and the second is the what will become TIF 1 expires in Batavia, and we'll have some money coming our way for that. So that will shift our balances positive. Now, we haven't negotiated the DEA contract until the year 2025, so that remains to be seen, but we're assuming at this point that the costs for salaries go back to inflation or CPI, which for the 10-year average is 1.8%. So basically, in this forecast, we're assuming that unless we know otherwise contractually, that our salaries are going to increase by 1.8%, more what the 10-year trend has been for CPI. The other thing that we have going for us that we have to work on is the fact that we're implementing a minimum wage that increases costs to $15 an hour. That has to be implemented in full by January 1st, 2025. So we're just about to begin negotiating our contract with VESPA, and there are a number of those positions that start below $15 an hour. So we'll have to make some adjustments there. It doesn't happen instantaneously. It'd be something that be phased in between now and 2024. And as the board is well aware, we outsource a lot of our work in this district. We outsource our food service, we outsource our custodial services, and we outsource our transportation. So those contracts will all come due in this 5-year horizon, and that $15 an hour minimum wage will put pressure on those contracts as well. So we can expect, in all likelihood, that those contracts will come in higher than CPI. Now, in this forecast, we're assuming that they come in at CPI. We'll come in with higher revenues in some years, maybe lower revenues, higher expenditures and lower expenditures, but these things tend to average out over time. And as long as we manage our contracts carefully and our staffing carefully, we'll be in good shape in terms of balanced budgets. But it's going to be close if we're not careful.
If we were to extend this forecast out another, I believe it's 2 years, we're pay off all of our debt, correct?
Yeah, it is 2026 that all of our debt would be paid off. That doesn't necessarily mean we have more revenue. So the thing about this, and I forgot to mention it, thanks for pointing that out, but that is true. This forecast only contemplates our operating funds. And so our bonds or our debt is in the debt service fund, not an operating fund. So when those bonds are paid off, the tax rate will adjust accordingly, but we don't have the opportunity to grab that cash and move it into our operations. It just comes off the tax rolls and means that property taxes for residents would be cheaper in those years.
If we are looking at the big picture and we are making master plans, do we want to extend that out when we are making those considerations? I mean, we're having the discussion, just make people aware, hey, we're 7 years out. This is the situation we're going to be in. Yes, we're going to be negative. However, we have this coming back, but we're going to have these considerations taken so people don't feel like something is being sprung on them in 5 years.
Are you suggesting that we make a forecast that's 7 years?
No, I'm just saying if we just making a note saying, hey, all of our debt obligations are going to be paid off. However, we are still going to have to maintain our buildings and do everything that money we will no longer
So are you
have.
saying don't count on paying that debt off and having it be gone forever?
I'm saying that is something that we would want to consider when making a master plan.
That is definitely a key component of that master plan. And so the thinking is that we would consider that if and when it came to our building needs on that end of the project horizon, not necessarily in this, as this only really deals with our operating funds. And while operating funds are implicated in that long-term planning, significant investments in capital projects like additions, renovations, roofs, those sorts of things would be outside our operating funds, by and large.
And I just want to make sure that the public is aware that we are taking that into consideration when we are making decisions and thinking about things.
And we most certainly are.
And that it's not a surprise to us.
So this, help me understand, I'm aware, right? This, next year we'll be looking at 2021 to 2026, and then it continues to roll. So that horizon becomes visible next year as a realistic thing. The other challenge, because I do these on my professional end of it, when you get a bit beyond 5 years, things become notoriously unreliable at being able to forecast. Its crystal ball is as good as anybody else's, but it gets difficult.
It's better.
Sure.
Once we get past 3 years, I would argue things are kind of touching though.
So while you may say these things are going to occur because we know they're going to occur, everything else around it becomes a bit unstable. And so you may be actually putting information out that may also be confusing. And I'm not saying no, I'm just saying we need to be cognizant of what we put out there and its accuracy.
Well, and our debt service doesn't impact us at all.
And it all, so it's almost like if there's a footnote, please keep in mind, that sort of thing. I'd
There's a bigger
totally be
picture.
behind that.
You know, having been around for a few years doing this and looking at financial projections of years past, this is about one of the rosiest financial outlooks as we've seen, because usually it's, I hate to sound like Chicken Little, but usually the trend goes just after year 2 or 3, it just dips down and like everybody's like,
run for the hills.
Run for the hills kind of thing. And so the fact that this is level indicates that we have to be careful. It's not that we can't spend money, but what we do spend money on, we have to be very careful about because it will bind our decisions moving forward. And so we just need to be very cautious and keep a close eye on things. And RAC is committed to doing that and doing interim projections and monitoring those funds as more of these variables become known throughout the fiscal year.
If you don't mind me adding that point, what we've talked about in the meetings is like the looking at these. So we asked Tony to look at what if the staff went up, not down, so that we can understand what the kind of annual impact is on this for hiring a staff person or 2 or 3, so we can understand how these things balance out. And then also it was about the $15 an hour minimum wage, because we know that's coming. What does that look like potentially?
That's going to have impact.
The other thing that's already factored in here too is the board is committed to a tax rebate for the outlet mall expansion that was completed, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 years ago now. That will end in 2024, so that means roughly about $750,000 come back to the district, or an expenditure that we wouldn't necessarily have. But you can see, even in that year right now, still with our model, with that $750,000 extra dollars in that year, we still are looking at something on the order of a $500,000 deficit. So we'll need to be careful, but I believe it's all managed.
Any other questions? Forgot that the consent agenda was the only action tonight. There will be action after closed session. We'll move on to administration comments too.
Just a celebration of how great the Batavia community is. Tomorrow, 127 families will be receiving gifts and fresh produce and food and toiletries and household products, thanks to just the generosity of all of our community. So that's great. 21 students participated in Shop with a Cop on December 10th. And 6 families, there was a Batavia High School graduate several years ago that decided that she wanted to help decorate homes for the holidays. So 6 families received a Christmas tree and all the trimmings from some local support as well. So great time to feel good about being in Batavia, and happy holidays to everybody. Hope everybody has a safe and restful break.
Awesome. So you want to start board comments?
Sure. I just want to wish all the students at the high school good luck on finals. And everyone else, Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, have fun on your break, relax. That's what I plan to do. Enjoy.
Thanks, you, Chris.
I will echo what Sue said. Everybody enjoy your break, refresh yourselves, spend time with family and friends, and we'll be ready to kick off the new year and start this all over again.
Tina.
Happy holidays.
Greg.
Happy holidays, of course. And I wanted to just extend appreciation to the board and the administration for making my first bunch of meetings out of my 20 or so I have to be as enjoyable as they are and as educational as they are. And I appreciate everybody's willingness to entertain my questions, because they're only going to get worse.
Accompanied by a rather evil laugh.
Yeah.
Karen.
I'm just going to follow up with happy holidays and good luck on finals.
Jeff.
Give everybody a Christmas break. Have nothing to say.
Present.
A Christmas miracle.
All right. We do have closed session on the agenda, and there will be action after it. So I would entertain a motion to adjourn to closed session.
So moved.
That was.
You have to say everything.
Pardon?
Did you say what?
Say why.
Yeah,
Here,
yeah,
here,
say what?
here.
That was really weird, I didn't even catch it. I would entertain a motion to adjourn to closed session to discuss student disciplinary cases, security procedures, and the use of personnel and equipment to respond to an actual, a threatened, or reasonably potential danger to the safety of employees, students, staff, the public, or public property, the appointment, employment, compensation, discipline, performance, or dismissal of specific employees of the public body or legal counsel for the public body, including hearing testimony on a complaint lodged against an employee of the public body or against legal counsel for the public body to determine its validity, and collective negotiating matters between the public body and its employees or their representatives, or deliberations concerning salary schedules for one or more classes of employees.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Gaspar, second by Blakely. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.